Okay, so imagine you're planning a flight from South Mims to Buntingford. You've used your protractor and you've worked out that that is a track of 0 to 4. So you start making your plug. So from South Mims to Buntingford, 0 to 4. Let's imagine we are flying with a true airspeed of 90 knots. And you've also looked at the 214, as you should, on the Met Office website. And it's showing you that at the intended cruise altitude of, say, 2,000 feet, the spot wind in the local area would be 330 at 15 knots. So whilst this is our track, the wind is coming from somewhere around here. So you can see if you were trying to fly that track, the wind would drift you further towards the east. So therefore we need a heading that then pushes into the wind to allow you to overcome that drift and fly your track to Buntingford. But what heading is that going to be? So that's where the CRP comes in, or Whizz as we call it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to put the wind on here. We need to plot the wind on this, what we call the wind side of the Whizz wheel. And we also need to make sure it's positioned correctly. So you can see an L here, and that's an L for low speed. Whereas on this side, it's high speed. You can see some very big numbers here. So you've got to make sure that this bit is positioned correctly with the low speed side on the windward side. So then you need to turn the Whizz wheel until we've got 330 lined up with the triangle at the top. And then we need to make sure the dot here is on our intended true airspeed, in this case 90 knots. So then I'm going to move this down so the dot is exactly on the arc here for 90 knots. So then we're going to actually, so this is the direction the wind is coming from, and the wind speed is 15 knots. So if you imagine that you were traveling directly into the wind, then you would be feeling the full brunt of that 15 knots, and it would slow down your true airspeed to a ground speed by 15 knots. So that true airspeed of 90 is then going to be pushed back by 15 knots. So that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So about halfway along here is where it's going to be. That's 15 knot difference, and that's 75 knots. Now we need to turn this to our track to see how this wind is going to affect us on our actual track, because we're not actually tracking 330, we're tracking 024. So I'm going to turn this now so that under the triangle is 024. And you can see, as we expected, it is drifting us, as we said, further to the east, to the right, and that's what's happening here. And then you can see these numbers indicate the angle of drift. In this case, so you can see increments of 2 degrees. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 8 degrees of drift towards the east. So we need to compensate by turning further towards the west. The easiest way to remember which way you need to turn the Whizz wheel is the side that the drift is on is the side you pull down. So you're always going to pull it down to find out what your heading is. So if the drift is on the right, you pull down on the right. If the drift is on the left, you pull down on the left. How much you pull by is based on the amount of drift. So it's drifting us by 8 degrees. So we need to compensate by going 8 degrees the other way. So if I'm really struggling with my subtraction, I can use these values along the top here. So from 0 to 4, I need to go 8 degrees this way. So that would be 5 degrees, 6, 7, 8, which is taking me to here. So that would be 15, so 16, 0, 1, 6. So now I turn this to 0, 1, 6. to see what the drift is. And you can see it's still showing a drift of 8 degrees. So 016 now being drifted by 8 degrees this way, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8 will take me back to 024. So I've balanced the amount of drift with the heading to put me onto my track. Now it won't always be that way, because now that I'm pointing differently into the wind, I could drift a different amount, either more or less. So you have to keep turning it, this time only by a couple of degrees, until the heading and the drift match up and come back to your actual track. But in this case, it's straightforward. We just needed to turn it once and it's put us onto 024. So now I can put here that my true heading is 016. The other thing that it gives you is the ground speed, like we had before when we had 330 set up. It was pushing us back by 15 knots, so our true airspeed of 90 gave us a ground speed of 75. Now I'm on 016, we can see that it is pushing against us still, but not the full brunt of it, so we've got a ground speed of 80. So that's important, because knowing the ground speed and your distance will tell you the time that leg is going to take, which is important navigationally, and it also is important for your deciding how much fuel you're going to use, or working out how much fuel you're going to use for each of your legs and for the total of your flight.